Thank you, snowboarding.
Thank you, snowboarding.
Hey friends, how you doing? This is Thank You Snowboarding, the podcast diving into all aspects of UK snowboarding culture. From the pioneers up in Scotland hand-making boards, hopefully more on that soon, to the current world champion Mia Brooks, who we haven't got on the show this time because she is very, very busy. But we will be having Mikey, her coach, soon. I met him out in Lax last week and he's keen to jump on and do an episode. So I've just got to get the X Games out of the way. And he's going to be coming on, so stay tuned for that. So up to date and going back in time, that's where we want to explore. My name's Chris Cracknell. I am a long-time snowboarder. I also am a music producer. And this podcast was a passion project, really, to get me back into snowboarding and to make sure we document the crazy history that the sport, especially in the UK, has had and how it reaches much further than just the shores of this country. And on that, this week's guest, Stu Brass. Stu Brass. There's a lot to say about Stu Brass, and we did this interview in two pieces. We sort of did the original episode and then we both felt that we'd skirted over a lot of things. So there's another section at the end where I caught up with him. He's currently in Sri Lanka. I was just back from Lax. And we covered some other things as well. So it's quite a long one, this one. But as you'll find out, Stu has had quite the life in snowboarding, really, from dry slope rider up at Rossendale to becoming a pro rider on Burton to then being one of the first pro riders on Salomon when they entered the snowboarding world, to then becoming part of the BSA and moving behind the scenes, creating Soul Sports, and then with Spencer Claridge starting to run the British Championships. And then sort of again moving on, becoming like production for films like Chalet Girl and the TV programme The Jump. So there was loads of different things we needed to dig into, which is why we sort of went again, just because there was things left untouched. So Stu's influence over UK snowboarding and worldwide is not often regarded, but he certainly has helped shape the scene from the AIM series and the school tours. That's one of the things that blew my mind, was the fact they were going into schools and showing kids snowboarding. Now, why isn't that happening these days? That is definitely something that needs to come back. That is where the future of the sport lies, is getting young people into it. Otherwise, we're going to become a kind of generational fad. And there are kids getting into it, but there's not the coverage on TV that it used to have with programs like Bored Stupid. And I thought the schools tour was inspired, and I only hope that whoever is the governing bodies can kind of find a way to make that work and put that together. So people like Stu kind of spearheading things like that. It's really, really interesting stuff and shouldn't be underestimated, the influence he's had. The other funny thing about Stu is that for a long time he kept, I don't know whether he mistook me for my brother, but for a long time, whenever I'd see him, he'd always be like, "All right, Dave." And it always reminded me of, is it Trigger in Only Fools and Horses? Like, he did it so much that I thought maybe he knew what he was doing and it was a joke. Or maybe he didn't and he just couldn't really tell the difference between me and my brother. But I always thought that was always funny when Stu would be like, "Right, Dave." But he didn't do that when he came over this time. So, maybe he's recognised the differences between me and my brother now. Anyway, good times. So I'll be back in the middle just to sort of tee up the next half, and then I'll be back at the end for all the housekeeping stuff. So let's get to it. Stu Brass. It's a real joy.
Was it you that came up with the idea and then Jeremy supported it, or did you kind of like chatting to him and he's like, "I'd support something like that"?
No, I was listening to, do you ever listen to The Bomb Hole?
I don't actually, but I know of it. Yeah.
So I was listening to that. I was doing some painting and decorating work for a friend of mine who's got a student house. And there was a guy called Blue Montgomery.
Oh yeah.
Something to do with Capita, isn't he? Or going to Capita or whatever. And he was like, oh man, snowboarding used to just be fucking cool, and graphics and boards were cool, and people partied, and it just used to be a bit punk rock.
Yeah.
He's like, and it's just not like that anymore. And I was like, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And then I was just like, I think me and David had a conversation about just everyone getting older, and it's like, we need to start capturing some of this stuff. So I know how to build a podcast, and I've done interviews with people before, and I just went to Shannon and just said, I've had this idea. It's not really like Matt's, because Matt's has sort of gone off on a different tangent, sort of really. I was like, so this is like really sort of bracketed. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, I didn't know that we wanted this, but their whole thing is to try and build the community of snowboarding, as you know, right? Yeah. So yeah, they jumped at it really, and it's just fucking great, because it's mostly people that I know or I'm only one step away from, and talking about snowboarding. I mean, it's what I like doing, and it's affording me, it's like affording me the opportunities to go now.
Yeah,
because I hadn't been for like 5 years just because of kids and work and money and all the usual trappings of.
I mean, that's one beauty with Moran's place. You just get to have an affordable holiday as well, which is.
Yeah, well, I sort of do feel. I feel a bit bad having been in, had the chalet, and had sort of people come in and staying with us, and you do a mates weeks. And certain people always turn up for those weeks, but you don't hear from them the rest of the year, sort of thing. And I don't want. I mean, I'm not. I don't think any of us are like that with Chris, but I don't want to ever feel like I'm taking advantage.
He'll only have people out now that he wants there anyway. I mean,
it's such a rad place. I went there for the first time in December, and it was just so great. Straight away, you sort of feel comfortable at home. Brilliant, isn't it?
Well, he's a great host as well. So apart from he was ill for the first 3 days, he was proper floored. He always
gets ill at Christmas though.
I think there's
ill,
like a head in the sort of duvet for 3 days.
Well, he was the epicenter of COVID as well, wasn't he? He was at that party where they were doing the conga in Chamonix. That was apparently like ground zero.
Was it really? Okay. Oh my god.
I don't really start anywhere.
No.
So we just get into it. Yeah, sorry, it's because I've got to pick my daughter up because we're both first day back.
Yeah, it's no problem at all.
And the kids, 2 of them didn't really want to go to school this morning, so I didn't get my daughter until 11. So we're both trying to shit, we've got loads of work to do before the kids go. So yeah, she's got a proper job, so I've got to do the school.
Nice.
So yeah, where should we start? I know where we should start. We should start with Kickstart. That's where we should go first. Okay. Just because I'll see who's that guy. Who's that guy that was on Dougie Lampkin?
Yeah.
Tell me about. Let's start.
So actually, it's funny because I rewatched. I found the old YouTube clips.
No way.
Of Kickstart, and I was in the same heat with Dougie Lampkin and Graham Jarvis. Well,
right.
Dougie's obviously gone on to win 12, 14 world titles and be a total legend. And Graham has gone on to be like an enduro world champion, and he's got millions of followers. He's in that scene, unreal. But we all kind of started off in the same.
How did you get into that?
My dad was into motorbikes.
Right.
He used to build his own bikes and go grass track racing, and did a little bit of speedway, and wanted us to get into bikes. And motocross was too expensive. Because he was going to we have 3 kids, 3 brothers. It was that's going to be an expensive hobby. So let's go trials riding. You'd only need 1 bike, not 2 bikes each. And so we've had bikes since we've all been 5 years old. And that was what we got into. And
did you all do it?
Yeah, all 3 of us, yeah. And my dad as well. And then my mum would be on observer, so it was a real family thing. And we'd go around most weekends, local trials, and then obviously we got better, and you've got D, C, B and A class.
Yeah.
So D class is up to 9 years old, 10 years old. So Simon and Russell were both British champions when they became 9, like in that D class.
No way.
And I was 3rd, so I was the runt of those of that, if you will. But so Russell was actually Russell was probably the most talented on the motorbike of the 3 of us, and he kept doing that till we were like 16 or something. He was, and I stopped at about 14. That was the second time I went on Kickstart. I'd done Kickstart, and then after that I was kind of into canoeing, and I ended up doing that instead of motorbiking, really.
I did. My mate, do you know Cool Bus Rob? He was like kayak or canoeing or kayaking.
Yes, yeah. So I listened to his because it's so funny how like all the places I used to go canoeing were the place I went snowboarding.
Yeah.
So like Bourg St Maurice, we used to go there training and go and kayak the Isère. I mean, I knew a ski resorts around anyway. And Strin as well up in Norway.
Right.
That's where the Junior Worlds were.
Oh, is it?
On the river that's the glacier melt from there.
No way.
So when I was 17, 18, that's where I went to compete there. And
so
then I went back in the summer to snowboard like 4 years later or whatever.
No way. So places that you recognise were already...
They'd already places I'd been to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd been kayaking before, then I went snowboarding.
That's fucking... The one in Bourg's gnarly as well.
Yeah, it's where they have the French Championships.
Yeah, I've watched it.
As well.
And it's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, that's a...
But the Kickstarter thing, when I was... I specifically remember starting secondary school, and the first day at school, I had to ask for permission to have 2 days off to go and film Kickstart. And for the next 5 years, I had down the corridor like... It's like...
But that was one of those shows like everyone watched. Do you know what I mean?
It was massive. There was like, what was it, 3... I think we only had like 3 channels.
Yeah.
Maybe 4. Maybe Channel 4 was out. I can't remember.
Maybe.
So it's a massive viewership.
Yeah, everyone.
I've still got my bib. My brother gave it to me for my 50th. He's like, I've got a present for you. He's got all of his. And we were arguing over whether he had one of mine. So,
but I mean, talking about your brothers being like British champs and stuff like that, was there like a competitive... Did your parents did they harbour a competitiveness between you, or was it just naturally in you to do that? I
think naturally. My dad obviously was competing at motorbiking. I don't know how competitive a person he was. I mean, he probably... In fact, my mum is as well. My mum used to compete like at squash, so they've all had that kind of sporty...
Yeah.
Get good at something. But I think as brothers, we're naturally going to try and, you've got a brother, you're just always going to try and outdo each other in some fashion, aren't you? I
gave up on that quite. There was a point where I think Dave came out to the Alps and just, you could tell that he had something in him that I didn't have. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, yeah, fair enough.
I think when we started snowboarding, so I was 15, 16 when I first went.
Right.
And Simon's 5 years younger. So there's quite a difference, when we first started. So there was a period where, well, actually when we started riding dry slope, we were all quite similar.
Yeah.
As far as sort of... But then
where was that, Rossendale?
Rossendale, yeah. So when we first started then, we're just riding like the nursery slope, but we had a kicker on there, and every Sunday that's where we all used to hang out. And we just lapped the same sort of like kicker for, day in, day out.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And then obviously the main slope we'll put kickers on at some point. Then we ended up building more kickers to put on the main slope. And I think then after we'd done my first season, me and my brother, we then accelerated like quite a bit. I remember Simon coming out to the teen British champs, which was my first season. And he came out, went riding with us, and just like there was a real difference between our levels. And then it took him a few years to sort of catch up, really. Yeah, because
how did you... I bumped into you at the Val d'Isère pipe. I was trying to do my second season in Val, and it just wasn't really happening. But the pipe got dug for like December for a World Cup or something. Or there was at some point in that season, I think I went out twice to try and sort of figure out a way to do another season, and it just wasn't happening. But I bumped into you, Moran, Kenty. I guess you were all up from...
Well, we used to, because our first season was Les Arcs. So it's me, my brother Russell, Moran, Kenty and Steve Bailey came out for part of that season. He was moving around. And we just go up, because we knew the British Champs was going to be in Val d'Isère. So that was what, 90, is that 96? 95
96,
Brits.
wasn't it?
So that season we'd go up every now and again. We just go up and just go and hike the pipe.
Yeah.
Part there. And yeah, I think it'd been dug. I think they had the French army come and dig the pipes, didn't they, back then? Or they're the gendarmes or whatever it was. There was some kind of like, because it was all shovel, wasn't it? It was mental.
Did you ever see them when you were riding Les Arcs? You'd see like the French army guys all in white, like climbing up the mountain, and you'd sort of ride past them.
Well,
and just think,
Bourg is like the gendarme centre, wasn't it, as well?
Well, yeah, it used to have. Well, there used to be national service, wasn't there? And Bourg was one of the centres for it, so there was always loads of squaddies around. That was like, that's changed now. Because they got rid of national service, they've closed. That's all being redeveloped into other things.
I see.
So it's probably changing the dynamic of the town quite a lot. But I've not really been back there for a long time.
No, I've not been to. I went to Les Arcs Easter before last, so I was out at Chris's for Easter with Tilly. We went out and I went across for one day. My neighbour and another neighbour on the street where I live, they were all out in Les Arcs. So we drove to Paisley and then went up and went riding. It was so funny seeing like talking about places. Oh, yeah, I've done that, and then it's like, oh yeah, we named that run. And it's
well, Valley of the King, you named that, didn't you? I think?
Yeah, well, that season the French had their own names for stuff.
Yeah,
and Chris speaks French, but we just decided to make our own names up for stuff.
Yeah,
Heaven, Stairway to Heaven, Valley of the Kings, Nirvana. What else was there? Hidden Valley. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how
that's what they're still called.
It's funny how they're still called
Kings and Queens and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, you guys, how long had you been riding dry slope before you did a season? Because when you did that, were you shooting? Did you end up shooting with Christian in your first season?
So
must have been around it, mustn't it?
Okay, so my first time snowboarding was the 89-90 season. Right. So I went on a ski holiday. It's my second ski holiday with family. We started quite late, so I would have been about 15. And we saw a snowboarder, and we're like, "Wow, what's that?"
Yeah,
it was like just bombing around doing 180s and stuff.
Yeah.
So we decided on our last day to hire some boards and teach ourselves, because there was no snowboard school or anything like that.
No, of course not.
They gave us a hot snowboard. We kept our ski boots on, so we had the old school,
same as me.
45-degree angles front and back, and off we went on the drag lift and literally just taught ourselves. And there was powder, I remember, as well, because we were going from one piste across a bit of a powder section to another piste.
Right.
We ditched Simon. He was too slow, and he was obviously really quite young. He was only at 10. I don't know how our parents let us do it, because we just, they just let us go and they cleared off. In fact, I think it was The Invasion, or one of the first Eldridge Warwood films. They got the footage of Simon on his very first day.
Oh, really?
And he's got such a squeak. His balls hadn't dropped at all. He was like squeaky as, and he's something about like never again, and then cuts to him doing some, Cab 7 or something.
Yeah.
So that was our first venture out snowboarding. And then when we got back, they actually went to the dry slope pretty regular.
Right.
And got boards. But I was canoeing. I was kind of like 16, and the Junior Worlds were coming up for kayaking. I thought, I don't want to break my fingers on dry slope.
No, of course.
So I actually didn't go snowboarding then until we went on a summer trip. When we went to an Easter trip. So, yeah, it's typical. So we went out as a family, my dad's van. We had 4 kayaks on the roof. I had my mate, my brother Russell, and then Simon and his younger mate, and mum and dad. So there was like like 6 of us in the van with all the kit. So all the ski stuff. I remember the skis being shoved in kayaks and things like that. They went snowboarding because we were in Val d'Isère and in Les Arcs, in Bourg Saint-Maurice, so they could go up the funicular.
Yeah.
And then we were doing laps on the river.
Oh, right.
And then on the odd off days of us kayaking, me and Michael went snowboarding. And on that trip, I bought my first snowboard from Tip Top.
No way.
Got Burton Air 6.1 second hand.
Sweet.
When it was the small shop in the cobbled street.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They moved.
And I bought that then. And then I came back. Once the Junior Worlds had finished, I then just stopped. So I was canoeing like 8-10 times a week. It was, pretty relentless. And then I decided to just take time off, go and do the stuff I've been missing, which was we've been windsurfing loads and climbing, and brothers were snowboarding, and I was like, I'm just going to do a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Kind of take a break, and then pretty much ended up quitting kayaking, and thought snowboarding was great. And so at 18, we'd done loads of dry slopes. I think I'd done a trip out to Chamonix where Chris and Steve were, because they were like, come and see us. And I did 2 trips out, and then I was like, well, actually Russell was like, I'm going to do a season.
Right.
So he was working as a mechanic, and I was working for my dad as a carpenter.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm taking a sabbatical. I was like, Dad, can I go? You know? So we both went. We bought a cheap Astra van.
Sweet.
And got ourselves to Les Arcs for that 94-95 season. And I mean, we were so lucky because we had like Chris and Steve, who were already, you know, Burton riders, and they were already hooked into that scene, photographers and filmers and everyone. And that's when Christian came out.
Yeah.
So Christian came out and did some filming for Odd Man Out. And obviously he'd been at the ski shows. I think that's how I'd met Chris and Steve, through working TSA or Black Diamond videos, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And he came out and he was filming Axel, because he was sponsored by Abe Woods, as the film was sponsored by them. So we were just on the fringe, basically. And we got a few shots in Odd Man Out. But then after that season, I remember getting the call from Christian. I can totally remember it in my parents' front room, picking up the landline. And he's like, hey dude, just want to let you know you're on the front cover of the new movie. I was like, really? I was like, what? I didn't even have a sponsorship deal. I was like, just on a flow. I think I got a cheap board from. Well, I did that first season. I got a cheap board from TSA.
Right.
That's how it subsidised my trip.
Shout out to TSA.
That's when I went out on I had a twin tip 53. And Kenty went out with a 149. Can you imagine doing a season 149 with low backs as well? Because there was a year when low backs were in fashion. And I mean, what were we thinking? I mean, you know, you meet someone like Axel out there and they're just laughing at you, you know.
But you seem to make quite an impression early on, like, you know, getting some shots in Odd Man Out. And that must have been around the time sort of White Lines came out as well. I remember there was one memorable sequence of you, and I know the hit in Les Arcs, you doing like a big frontside 5. It was like, fucking hell, that really is pretty big.
I mean,
you guys must have fucking charged at it sort of early on. Do you know what I mean? Did you sort of understand that?
I like style, so I decided to go for... I think I just went for high. I just like going fast and big, and like I love doing cliff drops and doing big jumps. So.
I think now's the point where we bring in one of your nicknames.
Do you know what? I knew this was going to come up, and I thought I need an answer for this, and so I can actually legitimise.
I mean, you have got a few nicknames that I'm aware of, but Bomber's definitely the one that stuck the most.
Bomb was the first one, but in my defence, there was always a jump, and it was like, who's going to hit it first? I mean, Moran's a wuss. So he was just like, he's not going to go first. He's not going to test the speed.
No, of course he's not.
So, and I was always keen to. There's fresh tracks as well on some instances as well.
Yeah.
And I guess I was keen to impress probably as well. You know, especially when I was behind Chris and Steve, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always up for dropping in first and testing something, which inevitably meant either I went too fast, so I just missed the landing.
Yeah.
Or maybe I just, in some instances, I know I did some cliffs that were too flat landing, and you soon learn not to make that mistake again.
Yeah.
But it's like we did the Strin Road Gap the year after it was made famous, you know, when Jamie Lynn and Terrier shot
that
it.
one, yeah.
And we did that, and I went first because So yeah, Steve and Chris didn't want to go first off it, and I remember going over. I remember looking down and seeing the landing go past me.
Well, it's not actually that big, is it? I don't
No,
think.
it's not actually that big. Like in distance, obviously the height of it was impressive.
Yeah.
But what you don't see is that when you land and ride out, you've not got much room to ride out, because then there's a stream that goes down
Right.
that then goes into a waterfall.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you hit the stream and you're on a snowboard, you're getting dragged with it. So it's pretty. The landing bit there, I seem to remember that being pretty hairy.
But you know, like just going back to that kind of naming places in Les Arcs. I mean, you guys definitely made a impression on Les Arcs. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously Odd Man Out, there was a big section there. That, and you know, with the Oasis track, that sort of sticks in people's. When I think of Odd Man Out, I immediately think of Les Arcs. Maybe that's because I lived there. Do you know what I mean? But well, and then obviously from that, a whole culture of people started gravitating towards Borg, didn't they? You know, like you had that Madame M's apartment.
Yeah.
With the.
Is it 47 Rue Desert?
35 and 47. 35 is on the road and 47 is the one behind it. Well, you know.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
I mean, our house was on Rue Desertot as well. It was down at the end by the cheese shop.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know it well.
I don't know how we ended up going to Les Arcs.
I mean, how did you find those apartments?
I don't know. I don't remember how we did half the stuff we did.
Because you were the first ones in there, weren't you? I think.
Yeah. Chris would have mostly found them probably because he's the one that speaks French. He was definitely the one that spoke to Madame Morel because we had.
Because they were so cheap. I remember it cost me like 400 quid for the season or something to live there.
It was. And my first season I did on. We saved up, me and my brother, during the summer, so we didn't have to work out there.
Yeah.
And I think we saved up £1,400 to do the season. Yeah, each.
Sweet.
And that's what we lived. And within that, we then did some trips. We went out to, I know we went to Avores, went to Chalet Snowboard. Stayed there for a few days because Chris would pick up his new Burton kit from there. They'd send it to there, and then we did some other little road trips in that money, and it was so cheap, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Actually, the first season we didn't live in Borg. We lived up in Les Arcs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in 1800.
Yeah.
I don't know why we chose. I mean, we chose Les Arcs because Steve and Chris were going, but I don't know why they chose it. I don't know how it got on their radar in the first place.
No, I remember. I guess. In fact, where were you that season? Because I remember my second season we did in Les Arcs, and Steve was being put up in the Crystal Rep's apartment.
Oh right. Okay.
I mean, she was clearly not happy about this situation. Like she thought she had an apartment to herself for the winter, and then all of a sudden, Steve's in there with her. And then obviously we all start hanging about as well. And but yeah, I can't quite. I think you weren't there. You were around with Neil and Danny. I guess road tripping around. I don't know. I can't remember.
So we did, the second season when we did in Borg, we were then travelling a lot more.
Yeah.
So that we did day trip with Christian. So we went to States,
America.
and Neil was there. So Neil, Danny, we had like several apartments, and that's like you said. It went from 4 or 5 British guys, 4 or 5 Belgian guys, and then obviously whatever French sort of locals there were in Les Arcs. So then the next, I think it was I remember thinking either the next season or season after, there was like 60 Brits, 60 Belgium. It was the same. It was what happened in the British scene in Les Arcs happened in the Belgian scene the same way. You had Axel Demir, Philippe Lemon. Those guys were effectively, promoting it like me, Steve, and Chris were.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a culture sort of built up around Borg, and yeah, it was a good time because there was a lot of, like any day in the park, you'd have most of the best British riders, most of the best Belgian riders, and a load of Frenchies.
But it's got amazing free riding there.
Yeah.
There's like so much of it. I mean, the parks weren't really, you didn't really get many good parks back in those days, did you? Like in the late 90s?
No, France hadn't really figured it out the way sort of America had figured out parks, had they?
No, not even close. It was, but I think that's where we were building a lot of kickers, and we weren't doing huge amounts of like free riding type shots and stuff. We were trying to. It was more to get to places where people couldn't build jumps the same, like over the back of the back of Heaven. I remember building a jump down there with a Frenchman, and Scout was shooting. That's who we shot with mostly. And it was great for him because he had a new outlet of all the British magazines. He was obviously shooting for the Belgium's magazines, and they have the French as well. So we built a really good relationship with him. I remember going down the back, and we were riding with Axel, and Yubi was there as well. He went off this jump. It was so. I think it's the longest jump I've done. I remember it was the longest 360, but I was probably about 2 meters off ground the whole time. It was he just seemed to follow the contour of the jump, and he over rotated and scorpioned, and he ended up heel edge cutting the back of his head.
What?
To a point where it's like, I don't know, 4 inches or something like that. So we had to then hot foot it down to Paisley to get stitches in because he was bleeding, properly pouring out. And that was when I was thinking, we're quite exposed out here. We are in the middle of nowhere. Like to get round.
Yeah, you are. Because even when you get to the bottom there, you've then got a kind of bum board. There's like a cross country track or something, isn't it? Like you're not to the road, are you? You've still got to go.
Oh, you get down to. I remember going down to it, and there's like a wooden cross which is on the top of a massive
That's
cliff.
Right. Yeah.
And we went down that bit, and then realised you couldn't. That was a cliff, and we had to hike back up and then traverse out further.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot of. I mean, they're big mountains, aren't they? I mean, that's as you say, like it's a free riding.
Yeah, and they've taken friends' lives. Kiwi Trev,
that
stayed on in. He stayed on in the Zarts long after we, end up living in Sweden and then just travelling from there rather than doing seasons in one specific location. But he ended up getting caught out on there, and there's just. I guess it's the nature, isn't it, of the sport, and especially back then, you were less. You thought if you had peeps on, you were kind of educated to a degree, weren't you? Compared to now, you think if you want to go and do some serious backcountry, you go on a McNair or a Stenty or a McNab course, and you get looked after, you get taught, and those guys properly understand. Like Will does. They live out in the mountains. They get it. Whereas back then we were like, woohoo, freshies! What base layer?
You got away with it. So when did it start? Because at some point, I mean, there was a few people in England. In fact, it's just unlocking some memories. Like you seem to sort of like, right, I think I can make something out of this for myself. There was definitely like a shift between those who were in Borg, having a great time, not working for 5 months and going snowboarding, and then sort of a few people that started to their heads sort of rose above the parapet of like, actually, I'm going to take this a bit seriously and sort of take this somewhere. And you were definitely one of them.
I tell you what instigated it to a degree. So after that first season, I got on Burton with Chris and Steve were cheerleading me. To the guys there, and we end up, by nature of that, we just travelled quite a lot. So we'd do summer camps together, we'd then go and do trips, and we were really productive. We understood that if you work with a photographer, you'll get the shots. You're not just riding and doing what you want and they happen to be there. We understood the value of working with them. So if you're going to go off a jump, tell the photographer where you're going to go, what you're going to do, so that they know, if you're going to do an indie, then you want to be facing the camera. If you're going to do a method, then there needs to be a different position. Or the photographer might be like, hey, look, this shot's amazing from here. What trick do you want to do that works for the shot? That kind of way. Or even just not wearing all black when you're in the trees. Simple stuff, Yeah. So we quite quickly realised that that's how you'd generate more coverage and working with it. And obviously there was magazines starting, White Lines and Snowboard UK and Document. There was loads of outlets for it. And they were all crying out for snowboarding. Think about the 90s. 96 through to 99 was a real, hotbed of people wanting a piece of snowboarding. We had Budweiser, Bud Ice's sponsors and Casio G-Shock back then, and it was so people wanted some of that action, and I was on Burton, and then I actually had a shop deal with TSA first.
Right.
So they flew me some free boards, and then I think it was part of some Burton program as well. But by season 2, we were in full flow. It was like we were getting a travel budget.
Yeah.
From Burton, and then the summer after, and that's the summer between my first and second season. I worked for my dad, and then after that, I didn't need to work.
Right.
Back. We just got paid for snowboarding, and
Wow.
that was, that was. You don't realise how fortunate you were back then. I guess you kind of just
That's the joy of youth, though, isn't it?
In fact, I was listening to you did an interview with Chris about mobile phones. So we got our phones together at the same time,
Right.
And I remember spending £400 a month for 3 months on the trot, and I was like, oh wow, this is what mobile phones cost. But I had a Swedish girlfriend, so I was like, I was calling Sweden. I had no idea on roaming charges and all this sort of stuff. And you look back and think £400 then was probably like £1,000 a month now.
Yeah, that's a fucking
crazy
lot of money.
Ridiculous. It was. I think at the time, I was a full-blown carpenter, like proper, getting paid normal wage, whatever else is. I was about 10 grand a year or something.
Right.
Well, I was nearly 3 times that by the time I was snowboarding. It was like,
Wow.
But back then there was an appetite. People wanted to sponsor and pay, and
Yeah.
there was. It's different now I did when I started Soul Sports. I ended up doing the top 20 riders. I asked them all privately how much they were earning.
Right.
For like their board sponsor, their eyewear.
When you say the top 20 riders,
who I
UK
thought,
based?
Yeah,
or,
UK.
Right.
So how much they were earning to each sponsor, because then I would then give them feedback and say, you could improve on your goggle sponsor, you could improve on your clothing sponsor. So I never actually told anybody else what they were getting, so it was in confidence, and it allowed everyone to kind of make sure they were all getting their worth, and I got an understanding of where the industry was sort of fit.
Right.
And that was like early 2000, and it was surprising that they weren't at that stage of what we were back in the in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the money was just gradually dwindling, but that it was such a buoyant time.
But I mean, for you, one would think that sort of being on Burton is is where it's at. Do you know what I mean? They were the biggest brand, and you think if you get on Burton, then that's it. You sort of made it. But then you went to Salomon and Bonfire, didn't you, when they sort of started putting out boards?
Yeah, well, they didn't. Chris and Steve were European /UK budget.
Yeah.
I was on UK budget, and there's only so much they can support.
Yeah.
And if not, then it's going to get diluted between everyone.
Yeah.
So, and I had got offered Bonfire clothing, and because they couldn't support me on as much to the same degree as what Steve and Chris were, I took that, and then I got a Volcom casual clothing deal.
Nice.
And then Salomon bought Bonfire to then develop the snowboard side of it. So Brad Stewart became part of that program, and because Webster was doing Bonfire, it's like, do you want to come and ride Salomon? And I thought it was a great opportunity then to make my own sort of name, if you will, or and also it freed up Steve and Chris, because they were obviously legends in their own right when they were there. I was still chasing their tail, and this was a sort of a new, and I guess it was a bit of a brave shout, because it was a ski brand, back in
that seems to
it's still a ski
remember
brand, but then it was literally a ski brand. Was like
but them coming in, and they had a distinctive look, and they had like all cap construction, and it was Salomon, and everyone was a bit like, whoa, hang on a minute, they've decided to come in, have they?
Yeah, well, he went to Mount Hood in '96 with Webster and Sang Tang to do a Bonfire, to go and hang with the Bonfire crew, basically.
Yeah.
And I got given one of the first 50 Salomon snowboards, and they didn't have a snowboard press at the time, so they still had the ski press, so ski with. So it was like 3 lines like
No
this
way.
in the boards.
Jesus.
I remember it was something like that. It was like, this is a bit weird. In fact, that trip, well, I don't say to remember because everyone knows it, but the Ingemar Air from Ritz Grandson.
Oh, the quarter pipe backside air.
So I was in that summer, I was in there, and Jason Ford was drawing, he was trying to articulate what had happened, because obviously we weren't sharing pictures around, there was no, and he just drew a stick man on the top of this lip. No, sorry, drew the lip with people still with stick men on the top, and then drew Ingemar like 10, 15 times higher than what these people were, and it's like that's how high he was. Like I remember thinking that is just absolutely nuts. But that was on that trip.
Right.
And obviously when the pictures came out, it went on every front cover of.
So like 6 front covers or something. That's
every magazine, didn't it? Went out, which is kind of not normally. If one gets used in one place, it doesn't get used in others, does it?
No.
But that was one of those few shots that did.
Yeah.
Just go.
Yeah, well, it was like a seminal moment where snowboarding sort of leapt forward a bit, didn't they?
Mm. Yeah.
So getting back to, well, there's a couple of things. There was the big gap at the board test. That was a memorable shot of you front 3 in that.
That was fun, wasn't it?
I wouldn't go anywhere fucking near that. But actually, looking through some old magazines, quite a lot of people did go near it.
Yeah, there was me, Sasha Stenti.
Ben Graham
probably would have done. And it was board test, so it was powder, but it was like end of May.
Yeah.
And we'd had fresh snow. And I think even we did, I remember hitting it 2 separate days, and it had snowed in between, so it filled in the first tracks.
Right.
So the first day I remember doing straight airs, and I did a method which I got in my checkout for onboard, whatever it was.
Right.
And then I told Webster, I said, can you sequence this? I didn't tell him what I was doing. I said, just sequence the next shot. I didn't want to sort of tell him what I was doing. And front 3 did just over rotating. I was like, really, I felt like it could have had it.
So was that a judiciously cut landing shot, was it?
You can see I lay back. You can see that I lay back and literally just land straight. So I hadn't over rotated at that point, but the momentum was still moving. So literally like landed and almost like butt check to bounce up to land to ride out switch. But
fair enough. It's a big old.
Maybe back then it was classed as a landing, but you wouldn't get away with that these days.
I mean, there wouldn't have been Odd Man Out. If you'd have cut all the landings out of Odd Man Out, there'd be no tricks in it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very true. It's amazing what was acceptable back then.
Yeah. But the other big thing which I actually saw was a backside air in, I think it was the Sasfay half pipe. That was, you seem to be out to prove something to somebody.
There was, I think the one you're thinking of is the Lazarks.
Was it Lazark?
Because it was the big air. It was a half pipe big air. And GNU put up 250 quid or something for the highest air. And I'd missed out on, I didn't do very well in the half pipe contest.
Yeah.
And I thought, I've got this. I'm just going to go fucking as fast as I can. And there'd actually, there's a slight transition, or there's a slight sort of path, I can't remember, in the walls. It wasn't a pure half pipe wall. It actually had a bit of a sort of track in it.
Yeah.
And I just felt so comfortable. I felt like I could hit it. It's one of those days, where you just feel like
just it's on.
I can. The same actually when at the 95 big air where Gumby did the half backflip.
Oh yeah.
So I'm stood at the top of it. I was in the final then, and Gumby had hiked past us. We were like, "Where are you going?" He was like, "I'm going to start above here." He came past us and he was hurtling down, and we actually went back and filmed that with Odd Man Out.
Yeah, that's right.
A day,
Front
like a week later or
rode it.
Exactly, yeah. And David Vincent got some shots, and I remember feeling that day really comfortable. Like I probably went as high as Gumby on that, but it just, for some reason, it just felt right.
Yeah.
And it was the same in that half pipe that day. I just felt like I could just go as high or as fast as I wanted into it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing that and just thinking, shit, that's a different level of riding. Do you know what I mean? Like there's everyone sort of getting a few feet out maybe, and then there was that, and it was like, whoa, shit, now that's another thing.
But it was just, I mean, a lot of it was just that speed, isn't it? It's not, it's not like the same skill as watching someone doing a switch backside, or maybe something like there was always. I think I've made more of my name for doing those kind of bigger stuff in that sense. In fact, that shot, Salman used it as a poster, and it got. It's funny how it keeps popping up. A friend of mine was working in Brighton in one of the shops, and he says, "I've got a lot of your posters in here." He's like 15 years on from it, and it's like they're all rolled up in the back in the stock room.
No way.
So he gave me some, and then. It was like, maybe it was like 5 years later or something after it come out. I went to get my hair cut in London, and I went to the toilet, and when the door closed, there's me
on the back of the door.
The guy at the hairdresser was in snowboarding, and he got my poster on the back of the door, and I was like, that's a bit weird.
That is a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
but cool. But I guess then you sort of appreciate your value in what you're doing and what you're getting paid and things like that, because it's kind of getting outside of the sort of circle of influence and out into the real world where just your average Joe has taken notice of it and likes something. Do you know what I mean?
I think we understood the value because we were travelling a lot and we were spending lots of money doing those things. And obviously we realised that brands were benefiting from that.
Yeah.
And we're looking at it and saying, well, hold on, mate, we just spent like $3,000 on this, and you've got generated from that, say 6 full pages, and it costs you £1,000 to advertise. Therefore, generated it's editorial rather than advertising, so it's got greater value. We sort of picked up on nuggets of things, and to be able to argue, to the brands. I remember we moved to Oakley. I was on Arnett, and then Oakley started to make a bit of a move into snowboarding, or certainly in the UK market. Pre-Stu Morgan, just before Stu Morgan.
Stu Morgan years. There's a book.
There totally is. He was a total legend, that man. And they offered us a contract. It was like £200, and I was like, "Oh, what, per picture?" And he went, "No, that's your retainer from the year." I was like, "Oh, right, okay. Well, you need to put another 0 on the end of that at least." And we were being a bit ballsy. It's like, "Well, who's getting that?" And I didn't know who was getting that at all, but I just thought we'd probably get more than Ford.
Yeah.
So I got a dragon contract from Turvey, I think Pete Turvey, and said, "Can you just make one up that looks really good?" And I gave them that to Oakley, and they turned around and gave us a contract for something like $2 or $3 or something.
No,
and offered us 2, but they were moving into an area that they didn't.
I mean, you essentially got to buy your way in.
Yeah, but we were blagging it. We were totally blagging it all. The whole thing. Even when you're interviewing Chris about the ski show.
Yeah.
So it was called the ski show, and we took a stand, and I think Chris referred to it. We had our snowboards, and we had pictures of us riding the snowboards from the magazines, and we put them on the wall, and we did a raffle throughout that to pay for our time and space. Oh, not space. So we got the free space because we were the snowboard advising.
Yeah.
Because snowboarding was like new.
Yeah.
It's like 96 it would have been, and we convinced the show that they need to have a point where people could learn about snowboarding, and we were the go-to people to come and ask about it. Because there was just nothing, it really was like sort of new. But we blagged our time, and then we just came with the idea of raffling our kit off. And it's quite vain, really, isn't it? Win a picture of me and Steve and Chris.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
But you did just find a way, didn't you, back then, so you could then continue to go and do what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So when did you sort of make that decision to, I guess, not be? Well, what was the situation where you then sort of decided to start Soul Sports? So for the listener who doesn't know, Soul Sports was what, like a agency sort of going between athletes and brands that wanted to promote their thing.
To probably be a bit clear first, I went snowboarding because I wanted to travel.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I didn't go snowboarding to become a pro snowboarder. I went snowboarding because I thought it was a vehicle to go travelling.
Right.
And that's when so everything about snowboarding was about going to new places and travelling and seeing places.
Okay.
So that was the initial and the backbone of the pro side of it, if you will.
Yeah.
And I was never going to retire from it. I had a good income that allowed me to go and spend for a good 6 years of doing what I want to. And I watched Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money.
Fucking hell.
And I
I
thought,
wasn't expecting this.
I could do that for
Oh, yeah.
snowboarding. And also there was a lot of media picking up on snowboarding. They weren't interviewing the right people, so they picked people. And I was like,
Yeah.
who in earth, why are they talking to that person about this when they
Yeah.
should be speaking to that person? And I just came up with the idea, I thought, well, hey, look, I want to put profiles on a website and I can then help represent the people. So we're putting the right face on snowboarding.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we all felt, you know, a value. We were all embedded in the scene, and we were quite protective of it.
Yeah,
and
everyone was.
wanted
I was
to-
talking to this about Jono, you know, like about being protective about snowboarding. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we certainly were. I was, you know.
Oh, massively. And it just became this. So at the Lax 99 British Champs, I went there with some printouts of questionnaires and gave them out to all the riders. They filled them in. I took them home. I was living in Sweden. I was with a Swedish girlfriend at the time, and I remember spending the whole summer learning how to use Dreamweaver, coming up with logos, animating GIFs,
Yeah.
and you know, all that stuff back then. And I had no skill set before that would, you know, I totally learned it on the spot, and then copied everything from people's bad handwriting to them filling in the website. And then it was meant to help present the riders in an opportunity, and also commercial sponsors were coming around. So there was people like Bud Ice that we had, and other brands. And I thought, and obviously Simon was 5 years younger, so he needed help with his
Of course.
sponsorship for that next wave. And I thought, oh, maybe I could do this and help them. So it was really athlete representation it started out as, on the basis of this, you know, Jerry Maguire sort of film. And
But
yeah,
it became like a bit of a badge of honour, though. Like, if you had your profile on Soul Sports, that meant you were of a standard. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I tried to keep it pretty open. There's quite a lot of profiles on there, and I kept Soul Sports because I did have the idea that I wanted to do more than just snowboarding and entries skiers, and
Yeah.
I like the idea of doing surfers and action sports in general. So the idea was to you know, do more, which I did do eventually. Just touched on a few other sports of key people, but obviously snowboarding was where, you know, I was a lot more part of it. And then after a couple of years, Ed, Lee, and Spence Claridge and John Bateson they had a company called Univet Management.
That's right.
And they were doing the bomb comp for us as part of snow bombing. They'd done one in resort, can't think of the resort now, south of France. And then the second year they were doing in Valar, and I joined partnership with them.
Yeah.
And I'd already been doing ski shows, so I've been supplying riders to do the ski show demos. But the format,
and fucking shoveling snow.
well, no, this is before then. So
right.
it's like kind of the format was like jumping into an airbag.
Yeah.
And it was just crap. It was just didn't represent things at all. And so we went in the idea of, can we do something out of snow? Can we do this? Maybe we use a dry slope in run to keep the cost down. And so we worked with the production guy of that, and then eventually we just took over that element of it.
I mean, there was a period with the ski show. I remember one where the TSA had their stand in front of, you know, like the big air ramp.
Yeah.
You know, I remember Jenny, you know, she'd throw a backflip or whatever. But there was a big crowd of people, you know, like the energy there was like real. Do you know what I mean? It was really cool.
Oh, they had one year. It was they put a stand around, so we had a jump over a vert ramp into a snow landing with some seating area around, and we choreographed it a little bit more to have a stooge that would come up. So like, hey, who wants to come and have a jump off the kicker?
Yeah.
And you'd have somebody put their hand up, and they'd be like, come on, let's bring him back here. He comes back, and then you see them stood at the top of the slope, the goggles on, and they're like, he's gonna go, like, kill it. And then the whole crowd are cheering him on, and then he'd go down the running, sketchy ass, and just make it over, winding their arms around and ride out. And the crowd just went mental over it. You know, it's like, and I remember some friends coming and saying, that was amazing. I can't believe you let that guy go off the jump. I'm like, Stu Edwards, his next British champion. I think he can handle himself. It's like, totally suck it in. But there was...
yeah, but the show of it was great. Do you know what I mean?
There was some... But then that came when we did a lot of the trains, so we'd try and make it more fun.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just people doing tricks, and it was, we'd select riders that would be, some riders just want to do switch tricks or technical that Joe Bloggs in the crowd, punter, snowboarder, skier, didn't really understand or care too much about.
Yeah.
What they wanted to see is someone stood on top of a stool holding the shovel up in the air while Scott Morris comes over and does a 180 nose bunk on it and then lands, there's a bit of jeopardy in there, having the car jumping over a car, or and then the trail of, we'd finish off the show with, and it was a show, we'd finish off with all 10 of 20 riders coming down one after another.
Yeah.
And, if you fell first on, it was carnage. But it was fun. And
it was fun.
Especially when they do it for 10 days. So it was like, and that was where the camaraderie between the skiers and snowboarders, I think, really kicked off.
Yeah.
Like back then, like the freestyle guys kicking in, so Jim Adlington and Jamie Strachan and who else? There was Dave Young. Really sort of like brought that gel in, and as it went on, the other, the new breed of freestyle skiers would so that's when we did the British Championships, and
we did the AIM. Let's talk about the AIM series, because I think that's something that's really important that is potentially missing, is what are the pathways for young people. So like the AIM series, describe what the AIM series was and how you decided to sort of get into that, because I imagine that was probably a fairly thankless task, wasn't it?
Well, it spawned from having had the guys at Bordex run the British Championships for like 3-4 years up to like 99, 2000. Then there wasn't much money getting put back into the sport or being handed over as prize money, or there was a bit of a revolt. The BSA took the championships back, ran it for a year, not very well at all. I think they just didn't have the resources to do it, and obviously the other guys were a professional event management company.
Yeah.
So they didn't really have a middle ground, and they took a year out. And I'd been doing soul sports, and they knew that I had a voice amongst the riders. And also I'd then been doing stuff with Spencer and Ed, and we've been doing the bomb comp for a year.
Yeah.
And we just thought, well, we could do the British Champs. It needs rejuvenating. It needs a new lease of life in it.
Yeah.
But how can we sell it in? The NPS dry slope series had kind of come to a close. That wasn't really happening anymore, and the pathway, the WSF, World Snowboard Federation, was doing, the TTR tour and things like that were happening. And we thought, well, let's try and build a pathway from a UK side that would then lead into the bigger global side of it. So we came up with doing some more dry slope events, the indoor events, and and then the British Championships. And there was all sorts of names being knocked around. I mean, Ed Lee was in charge of coming up with names. I mean, you can imagine what was coming out of that. I mean, I remember they had like STE series was one, Stars in Their Eyes or something. It's like bounded around. But anyway, we settled on AIM series, which is Artificial Indoor Mountain Series.
Yeah, that works.
And that's how it started. And we obviously talked to a lot of people in the industry as well, because we felt like everyone was vested in what was going to happen. Yeah. So we were going to the industry for sponsors, but people like Al Green, that was also on the SIGE committee, was like, schools tours. Why don't you think about trying to get kids in, like try and get new kids involved? So we came up with the concept of going to, I think the first year we had like 4 dry slopes, 2 indoor events, and then the British Champs. And we'd go to schools in that area. So we'd go to Sheffield. Yeah. We'd go on a Thursday and Friday into a local school, take over the PE lesson, so for pretty much for a whole day, and do trampoline demos, fashion shows, and just running around quizzes and stuff. It was fun, We had John Weaver and James Thorne have done the emceeing for that in the past, and then the pro riders would come along. And then the kids would get the opportunity to come to the dry slope that weekend and have a free lesson. That is inspired. That's their taster session. Yeah. And I remember a few years down the line, and I go and speak to the instructors and say, look, we've got kids from a local school coming. This is their first touch point. And it was a great touch point because we had sound system. We had good riders. There was a really good scene.
There was a buzz around it.
It's like a normal dry slope, but souped up.
Yeah.
And this girl turned around and said, "Yeah, you gave me my first. You came to my school." And she was a snowboard instructor.
No
It was
way.
like she'd gone through the whole process and
Yeah.
changed her. And there was another group of, in the end, I remember Matt McWhirter and some other skier. But we went to their school in Leeds, or near Halifax, and there was like 6 of them, all just went up to Halifax riding all the time, and they got their school minibus. One of the parents borrowed the school minibus to then take them round the events.
No way.
It was like such good stories of, and it definitely did create a really good scene, and people were looking forward to going from one event to another. And there's a really good scene with parents because they're the ones that are taking them around.
Yeah.
Jamie Nichols and Murray Buchan were 10 years old at the time when we first started it. Jamie's got 2 kids now. It's like, been to Olympics. It's
Yeah.
You feel like you've had a hand in helping grow that.
I mean, when did that stop? I mean, that would seem like a no-brainer of a thing to keep going, to keep introducing young people into the sport, and to keep like that.
Funding.
Right.
Totally funding. We had, as time went on, so we got some funding from the SIGB. So when you've got things like Slide Trade Show and Soltex, what it was, they have a surplus amount of money that they invest in different projects. And one of them was to try and see if you can get more people into sport. And obviously, so they supported our schools tour. And we did actually a separate schools tour a year after. We did like an 8-week tour for them.
Right.
As a separate project. And the AIM series, Orange came on board as a sponsor. And that really did kickstart things through. And that was like year 2 or 3, I think it was. And that made a big difference. So we could then support that. But when that finished in, I think, 2007, we struggled to then we changed the name of it because they had said at the time, AIM series doesn't really say anything to a mainstream audience.
Sure, I get that.
So we changed it to the snowboard tour and free ski tour.
Yeah.
It's like bronze seal, that's what it says on the tin. And some people look back at it and they're like, "Oh, I loved it when it was the AIM series." I'm like, nothing has changed other than the name.
Yeah.
Literally nothing has changed. But we didn't have the same funding, so some things had to get cut. And then gradually over time, and actually, participation at dry slope events just dwindled.
Right.
The scene just dropped. And
why do you think that was?
I think there's more snow domes, so there's more accessibility for
Okay.
that. When I first started riding, we just had Tamworth. We'd drive 2 hours to go
Fucking
and ride
miles to go. I
go and
know.
ride a session there. That was what we did. Whereas now most people have got one close-ish. And you need to look at the pockets of who the good riders are of the day.
Yeah.
And they are surrounded within that half an hour catchment area of an indoor snow dome.
Yeah.
So we did end up doing one big dry slope event because you want it to make it feel like it's good. You don't want to have like 30 riders come and rock up. You want to have 100 riders there and make it feel like it's a great,
totally,
a big thing. And the same with the indoor. It just sort of dwindled off, and it costs money to do these things. It's got
Sure.
And the sponsorship, marketing changed massively. So you come to like 2008, 2009. There's financial crisis, so that affected some things, but also the brands that had been supporting it, your Billabongs, your O'Neills, your Quicksilvers, all the big surf brands, they weren't selling. They were a shadow of what they were in the 90s.
Yeah.
Because kids weren't buying, they didn't want the T-shirt with a big back print on. They wanted the tiny little logo, or they didn't care,
Yeah.
So therefore the marketing budget didn't move down the chain.
Right.
And if you look back, most brands were trying to support the retailers and try and help them sell product.
Yeah.
So things like events were further down. Athletes were first. Well, PR, marketing, and the marketing was, through events or shop activations and athlete sponsorship. And I guess the events were seen as a bit of a nice to have kind of thing. We were the first ones sort of getting cut, if you will, on that.
So you sort of, I don't know if you diversified, but it seemed that I mean, I basically want to get to the show, the jump.
Hmm.
I mean, did you was that on your radar to do, or was that like an opportunity that came along and you thought, well, some of these things are dropping off, so we need to replace that with other things?
That came about through Snowboard Club. So we had
because you started that snowboard club as well, didn't you?
So we had Soul Sports, which was athlete management events, and then through our events, after year one, we already employed someone to do PR. Then we decided that we'd employ it direct. So we had Jenny Arnell working for us, and through that, we then realised that we could do PR for some of the brands that were in the industry. We did DCs, and we ended up doing Arc'teryx and O'Neill and all sorts of different brands.
Yeah.
But we had the staff to be able to do that. And then we realised that we didn't have anything that was direct to the consumer. So we were always very good friends with Duncan Worrell that had the border.co.uk. He started that when I started Soul Sports, and he was my tech behind the website.
Yeah. So
we've always had that relationship with him. And we said, why don't we make it a club? We'll do it together. And so we created Snowboard Club. And then we had this, so as a business, we were able to then talk to a brand and say, well, we own this audience of whatever, it's like 1 million people a month or something viewing it. It was a big site back then.
Wow.
The forum was super active and really active. And we were able to then show that we could, deliver any PR messages we wanted, or our own event messages, athletes or events. And that's when the Jump inquiry came in, because we were such a prominent figure.
Yeah. And
they said, we're looking to this TV show and we're just wondering if you could try and help out. And we said, well, look, we've got this agency that can do this. And that's where we got involved. In fact, Shally Girl was first. That's how we got that gig.
Oh, man.
Through that, I got the script sent through.
There's a whole episode in Shally Girl on its own, I think.
That was bizarre, that.
Well, we'll save that for another time, because I think there's a whole... Shally Girl holds quite an important place, I think. But yeah, I'm worried that we're running out of time, and I want to get to, obviously, we've just talked about things declining, but we're now at a point where you're taking the Brits back to Austria. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, obviously, COVID put a bit of a spanner in the works. We had a super good relationship with Lax, and obviously then things shifted for the resorts, the way that they approach things as well.
Yeah.
And obviously it was great. We had to find solutions. I think it was acceptable to not have an event going on for a couple of years, but then we were like, we need to get back out there and do a Brits and bring the riders back together and kind of, keep it going. And we couldn't get the support. We didn't have the financial support from sponsors because the sponsorship's not there. So it's very much resort destination marketing that we function on these days. Yeah. And we were talking to Myoften for quite some time, but things just didn't align. And we decided that we'd do one in Scotland. So we did the Cairngorm, which was so much fun.
Yeah, I've only heard people raving about that.
It was such a good scene. It was so good, like good vibe that we like, okay, this is great. And obviously TSA massively, and us Brigham, obviously the same company. Without their support, that would not happen. And neither would the Brits this year. They have been, I know this podcast is sponsored by them and it's that, but I can't tell you how much, or the audience, how much they've done to support even the AIM series back in day one, right the way through. It's been you need brands like that, and there's other brands and retailers that have touched on it as well, but none more so than what they've done. And the same with the indoor Brits we did this year, and then we managed to get the deal done with Myoften to bring it back out, and it's been, what was the last one? 2001, I think, was there.
Right.
And yeah, it's wicked. Yeah, be interesting to see what competitors we have out there, because it's changed over the years anyway. Back from '99, there was no parents there. It was just, it was the teenagers or the young 20s kind of like crowd.
Sort of seasonaires.
Exactly, seasonaires. And as time's gone on with the Brits, the sort of party scene of it has dwindled a bit, and then apres become more of a thing.
Yeah.
Because kids come straight off the mountain and everyone can hang around together, and so we don't have the big late night parties through till 2 a.m. partying, because the kids are too serious these days about competing, or at least there's another parent element that keeps them in check. So things have changed in that sense, and obviously we've got some amazing talent,
incredible
that
talent.
are competing on a world stage that don't need to compete on a British stage to make their name, but it definitely supports and recognises the new and under 18 sort of talent that are coming through.
Yeah.
And at the indoor champs, we had a massive influx of under 12s, like really encouraging to see, like cheek tingling, kind of like, oh, wicked,
Yeah.
It's kicking off again, kind of thing. So I think we're going to see quite a lot of a new breed of people coming out, I think, to the Brits this year, and still have that old school generation that are going to come and throw themselves down a border cross track in the hope of glory.
I think the sort of masters,
everyone's going to be egging each other on.
I think the masters category is quite hotly contested now, isn't it? I think there's a lot of.
Well, there is. There's one person, probably someone like Jono, will just seed it in among some people. It's like, who's going to beat me, kind of thing. It's like, oh, I don't beat you, and it escalates, doesn't it? And before you know it, everyone's got a lid and a bib on.
I mean, I think it's fun, and I also think that there's definitely a kind of reunion. I think it's come at the right time. I think there's been sort of talk about getting everyone getting a lot of old heads together for a long time.
Yeah.
And this is like an excuse to do that. And then I think it's just a nice thing for the scene to have, like that, sort of everyone's demob happy. Do you know what I mean? It's springtime in the mountains. I mean, it's all good times, isn't it? Really?
And it's such a good resort as well.
Yeah.
Like, obviously the park's amazing, but there's some amazing free riding around there if you're getting lucky with some powder. Great sort of town to go and hang out in. And I think it'd be a good, resettle itself again. I think I'm hoping that then we can then grow from that and learn a bit more with, and obviously the free ski side is equally, it's been kicking off as well. They've got some great talent on that side.
Right. I don't know anything about
that. But that also makes the event, or has done in the past, more affordable, because having the two means we can share costs across the two as well.
Yeah.
And the guys are the same, there's no, you take two skiers and snowboarders and put them in all clothes and hang out at the bar, you don't know which one's which.
No.
Generally.
So on that, and just thinking, you've just come back from Chris Moran's place for the new year, so you're still going snowboarding for fun, and with your daughter as well. Tell me about what snowboarding means to you, or has meant to you.
Initially, it was a vehicle to go travelling. Then it became a job.
Yeah.
That was fun. I got paid for it. Then it became my actual job, and I was vested in it and passionately involved in making sure it was represented. And it's changed as it keeps going through. You find new ways, and I've had periods where I'm just like, I just can't be arsed. I'm kind of just, plodding along. And actually, when Tilly started taking Tilly more into the mountains, she loves it. And you find we've been doing trips out to Moran's place, and it's so much fun. And kids are so much fun. They've got so much energy and excitement that you kind of rubs off on you as well.
Yeah.
So we've done quite a few trips, and I've just, like I said, I got back yesterday from one, and we had amazing 4 days of bluebird, great snow over Christmas.
Yeah.
And then we had a dump during the night of just over a foot, and it was like freshy day. Kids are just howling, and it's so much fun, and they bring a new thing. So, and actually at the end of the day, I got a chance to go off, and I went and hiked a couple of solo bits on my own and got some proper fresh snow, and I was like, yes. That because I've been riding a lot of summer slush,
right.
Cruising around behind kids, bring up the rear, and it was just really nice to get that, and that reminded me that I want to go and do a trip on my own, or with, like, go and do a McNab, or go and do a Stenty or a McNair sort of trip, or just go to Japan, go and hit some powder and just ride a bit more of another kick up the arse with it, I guess.
Yeah,
because we're not hitting the park, we're not hitting rails,
Fuck no.
Just want to go and cruise some powder and get some nice turns in.
Yeah.
And I just had that glimpse of it. So it's and moving forward, if we can keep snowboarding's given so much to me over the years. I've been in this for 20, 35 years almost, and it's changed my life, and I feel a responsibility, having been through lots and seen different waves, to keep it going. And the Brits at the moment is the only way we can. I feel we can do that.
Yeah.
We did. The athlete management looked after Jenny. She was the first person actually.
Yeah.
From '99 through to the Olympics in 2014. So we're not looking after the athletes anymore. So it's the events really to kind of keep things moving, keep a hand in. But we keep getting brought up for snow shows and all sorts. We did like the greatest snowman because we know snow, so it's like we get drawn in. So who knows what, we've got a job that's in the mix to do something in the Arctic Circle with an ice block for a TV show that's currently in the chat. So
wicked.
Still be involved.
And so just to finish off, why should somebody who hasn't been snowboarding for a while, or maybe let's tune it into you a little bit, someone that maybe used to go out the Brits just for fun times, maybe hasn't been for a long time, and why should someone get back into snowboarding, or why should somebody come along to the Brits or get into snowboarding? Like, what is this particular thing that we have? So why is it so enticing? Why should somebody do it?
Snowboarding has always been a passion that people share. Traveling, and I mean, it is a solo sport, but you're doing it with other people that are like-minded.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've got friends that I've met through. I live on the beach now, and they're very much water-based, a lot of them. Yeah. And some of them do go wind sports, but they haven't got mates that do it. And like, they're looking for someone to go with.
Yeah.
Rather than just go on their own. And I think things like the Brits, you're always going to meet someone. Everyone's there. You can go and ride with so many different people, and I see friendships that are built through the Brits that are then ongoing, through my social media, that they go and do holidays and they met at places like the Brits.
Yeah.
And it can be any trips. It can be anything from, other, like the board testing. So it's obviously a bit more industry led. And I think that's coming out. It's not just, even if you had a little bit of competing in the past, like you said, the Masters are hotly contested, it's still fun.
Yeah.
And it does get your heart in the start gate, your heart is bouncing like it's way more than it did when I was like, in my prime, if you will. And it's, if you want to kind of put yourself on that, in that sort of realm again. But I think just going riding, what I realised from this trip is you get go and ride some fresh, and you're like, oh, I want more of that. And you forget what that feeling's like, I think. So that this trip particularly really did remind me.
Can you describe that for you? Is there words for it?
Well, I put myself a bit out on the edge, so I walked up an avalanche slough to get to this bit and then dropped in. So I was a bit sort of like, I didn't know the conditions fully. No one had been there, so I thought, should I be here anyway? I could see my exit, so I was kind of like, all right, that's fine. But I liked that little bit of scaring yourself a little bit, and then once I was in it, it was just like, oh, just amazing, kind of like a video actually.
You can send me that.
I did a selfie, sort of a video in that sense, and it was, there's a real reaction to like, oh, that's sick, so yeah.
So yeah, that was the first sort of 2/3 of this interview. We spoke after Stu had gone home. We spoke later on in the evening, and Stu felt that there was sort of some stones we'd left uncovered, or that we'd had to sort of fly past due to time constraints, namely me having to pick up my daughter from school. So we agreed that maybe we should go again and see how it fits. Unfortunately, I was then jetting off to Lax, and Stu is now in Sri Lanka, so we had to do the second bit of the interview via Zoom. So the audio is a little different, but there's some gold in here, and I'm glad we did catch up, because there's some real funny stuff to do with the jump and to do with Jenny Jones and the Olympics and all that kind of stuff. But first of all, we got talking about Nick Hamilton, because I spoke to Nick and he wants to come on, but he's trying to collate. Was thinking about what to do about his sort of archive and how to present it to the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's
like, I want to come over and record the episode with you, but I can't just come over for the sake of doing that. And I'm thinking about doing something with my archive, so we'll hook it all in at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but yeah, I had a really nice conversation with him. We chatted for about half an hour a few weeks ago. It was cool.
yeah, he's wicked, Nick. I mean, he's such a integral part of that scene from, well, my era anyway, from like the mid 90s onwards.
Well, it felt like you were all on like you all entered like at the same point, and then your trajectories all sort of followed the same arc for a while. Do you know what I mean?
Ballistic, didn't they? I mean, he ended up being Trans World Editor in the end. I mean, you know, talk about a political role.
Yeah, but like in terms of, you know, you needed someone to shoot with, and he needed riders to shoot.
Yeah.
And you were both kind of at that same level where it worked really well, and you kind of kept doing that for a while.
It was perfect because Nick's half Finnish, and so he's quite in with the crew of the Finnish Jussi Oksanen and that sort of crew of riders. And then he was living in London as well, and it was a summer camp. I remember somebody saying, "We're going to send this guy out, Nick. He's a new kid that's like want to get into shooting pictures and meet up with him, do some shots." And I think then we just all got on really well. And then it was like, okay, let's hook up during the seasons, and White Line started kicking off, and it was, you know, it was perfect timing, really. But yeah, he's obviously very good at his job, as he proved. So
very good at his job. His history goes back longer, doesn't he? Because he was in London. He started hanging around at the snowboard asylum before.
Yeah, and I think he was
like when it was Martin Drayton was there.
Yeah, and I think he was shooting skateboarding quite a bit before he really got into snowboarding as well. Yeah, I mean, his story would be pretty interesting I should know it. I should know how he really started out with it, but.
Well, just in a short conversation, I found out loads of stuff that I didn't know. We used to hang out in London all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he ended up getting held up at a bank with a gun to his head. And that was one reason why he was wanting to get out of London. He was just like, he lived in Victoria and Pimlico, pretty much. And yeah, I think that was kind of I need to get out of London. Let's go snowboarding.
That's a fair reason, isn't it? All right, so I guess probably a big subject that we didn't cover was, well, we sort of touched on sort of soul sports, didn't we? We sort of got into the beginnings of it, but obviously you've worked with Spencer Claridge for a long time.
Yeah.
Tell me about that relationship.
Well, also I started doing the athlete management first in like 99, and then 2001, him and Ed and the other guy, John Bateson, they wanted to do their own events. They started a company called Union Event Management, and they started working with snowbombing and created the Bomb Comp. So it was like an independent competition within the sort of music festival. And I was interested in doing more events and managed to get my way in with as a fourth party to it. And we lost loads of money on it. We went to Villar in like 2002 or something. And it was ridiculous. We just had a carrot kept dangling in front of us, and we were sort of so naive that we sort of followed it. But what happened out of it is that Spencer and I worked really well together. We were both drafted. We got our heads stuck in. And that's at the time when we were just creating the AIM series. So that's when Ed was, I think I previously mentioned, Ed was part of that whole conversation. But as soon as we started it, Ed was like, got offered, you know, he was always destined for TV and MCing, and his career went off in that direction, and we went down the sort of, you know, the event side of the routes. But we actually did. Do you remember the Union Awards that we did? Like,
yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, when I remember you going, the Union Event Management, and then I was like, there's something else about that. Isn't there? Oh, the Union Awards.
So that was created. So yeah, we created that around that time. I remember we did. You look back at it, it was really funny. Some of the stuff we had, biggest caner, self-publicist. In fact, I think it was done at Bordex weekend. So we'd had it on one of the nights. And I remember the guys at Bordex being particularly pissed off that we were hosting a party night and they weren't involved with it.
Yeah.
And then when Haymarket bought it later on, there was more trouble. But yeah, we did it a couple of years. So much fun. Yeah. They were good. They were good events though. So it was fun. I don't think you get away with that same format now. It has to be too
Well, I don't-
serious, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's the size of the desire for it either. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like to feel what was the place? I definitely went to
We
one
did the
of them in
we did the
Hammersmith.
Hammersmith Fellow. We did the we had
Yeah,
that.
I mean to feel that with snowboarders
Yeah. We booked. I think
is quite
we sold it as
it's pretty
tables
legit.
of 10. And I remember Orange sponsored it, and we
Right.
had the Welsh boys, what they call the
the Dirty
Sanchez
Sanchez
boys, and they
Pritchard and
he
Dainton.
put a dumbbell and fishing hook in his ear, or was it his cock? I can't remember now. Anyway, he threw it, and then blood splurted all over the Orange table. It was just like, oh my god! But they actually, in the end, they found it quite amusing, thankfully. But we did skateboarding in that one, actually. We did skateboarding and snowboarding. There's joint awards for that one.
How did the skateboarders feel about that? Did they take to it?
I think it was all right. I don't think Christian was quite heavily involved for a member of trying to get them on side and sort of give it a bit more authenticity, a bit more credibility as well. And we had some brands like Etnies were involved as well. So they were Etnies 32. So they were bringing some of their kind of credibility to the stage as well. But the one before it was definitely the best one. That was at the Lighthouse in Shoreditch, and that was the most fun. That was the wild kind of night where. I mean, do you remember the Chris Carr one? So we had Chris wasn't down for best male, and we had all of a sudden we got inundated with why is Chris Carr not on the best male? And then we're like, okay, yeah, sorry, we probably have missed him out. So we put him on the voting thing, and within 2 weeks there have been hundreds of votes for Chris Carr, and we're like, right, okay. Anyway, so then when we had the best self-published award, we had one of those raffle tombola type things, that you roll around, you pull things out.
Yeah.
And I remember we pulled it out, and it was best self-publicist. It was Chris Carr. And I'm like, oh, let's just check to make sure they're all good. Chris Carr, and they kept pulling out Chris Carr. It was, it's funny how he goes on to become an amazing, PR agency with Canoe. It's quite.
It was all there. It was all there for him. Yeah. The signs were there.
Yeah. My brother, I think he got biggest caner award. Him and Elliot Neve had a drink off on stage, and he now buys and sells wine. It's
actually. That's just reminded me of when me and my brother and your brother Si travelled out to France on the overnight train, I think it was. And then we got to Les Arcs, and it must have been, it was when the British Champs was on. And we sort of got up the mountain, and I'd sort of done the season previously there, and I was like, look, Si, the jumps aren't that big. Feels pretty icy, just take it steady. And on his first run, he overshot the fucking jump by a mile, landed on the flat and dislocated and broke both his wrists.
He basically did a half backflip, didn't he, and came down both wrists Superman style forward. Hadn't him and David been to Junior Worlds in Finland, I think, something or just before that. So they come off this.
Yeah.
They come off the back of that straight into
Yeah, full of beans. And I remember riding down and just being he was lying there oh, I think I've broken my arms. And I was like, no, I'm sure you haven't. Let's just, just breathe and let's have a look. And I took his gloves off and nearly fucking threw up. His hands were back on his arms. And I was like, all right, just don't move. We'll get the piste.
Oh, cool.
But I from what I understood, you had to do quite a bit of brotherly looking afterwards.
It was for a little. Yeah. It was.
I was glad to tap out at the point that I sort of tapped out. Do you know what I mean? I was like, Stu, you can carry on now, man.
I remember seeing I can't remember who it was, but his mates brought him a porn magazine round, and I've got a picture somewhere of him with two casts with a porn magazine. He was just it's going nowhere.
Oh man. That was brutal. Well, back to Spencer. I mean, let's talk about kind of where your business is now. I mean, you've been through, I was in Lax last week, and obviously the British Champs was there. That felt like maybe like the high point. That seemed like a pretty big deal. You had that crane drop-in contest and all that sort of thing. It felt like, sort of the Brits was a fairly big deal.
Yeah, we definitely had. Like, once we started the AIM series and the Brits, we had a reasonable amount of funding from O'Neill and various other surf brands and the industry, and then Orange kicked in, and they were all looking for. Orange particularly wanted to do something in town that was a bit more of their own somehow, and that's where we just created that crane idea. I mean, you look back at it and it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, Thorny jumped basically out of a 6-story building. Behind him was basically the car park, and in front of him was a 9-meter high quarter pipe with a sweet spot. There was about a 1-meter window basically to drop into. But yeah, no, Lax were amazing. Lax was so, and they still are. They're a great resort. They're really forward thinking. They've great parks. They've got a great setup. And unfortunately, after once COVID hit, their marketing strategy and things sort of changed as far as how they could invest and do things. And unfortunately, we couldn't find a way to make it work. And obviously, and Meyerhofen obviously stepped in. So equally, another home from home, because Lax was the Brits in 1999, and Meyerhofen was 2000 basically, and 2001 as well. Yeah. And then it took a year break, and then we took it on and we took it to Les Alps. That's how it sort of happened.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, Spencer and I have been, since we started the AIM series, we've always worked together, and we just seem to. It's been 22, 23 years. I mean, God, we're probably up for some sort of wedding anniversary things.
How do you sort of structure the business? Because you used to have an office in Brighton that was a bit of a hub for all sorts of people, wasn't it? I remember I had a hot desk in there.
Yeah, we shared with Chris and Matt, who had their agency, and they were also doing writing for White Lines at the time. And then we had various other staff working for us over the time. And eventually, when we had PR became more staff orientated, whereas events we could kind of work with a lot of freelance. And once Spencer and I both got our first kids, are born 7 weeks apart as it happened, and we just decided that we'd lost somebody that was looking after the PR side of it, and rather than rehire, we just thought, you know what, let's not do this side of it. Let's stick to what we particularly like. We like doing event production, and I pretty much just coming to an end with Jenny on the athlete management side after the Olympics. And we just decided to earn a bit less money, but have a better time with our kids and more flexibility. And I was looking to move a bit away from Brighton, and it's definitely been the best move for us. And we're so comfortable working with each other. We know what each other does. We rely on just get on with it. We don't have to have too many conversations about stuff. And it's worked out a lot less hassle, should I say.
Okay. Yeah. And then things seeming like a lot less hassle, let's talk about the jump.
Yeah.
Let's get into that, because we kind of skirted over it a bit last time. Because I remember we were in a bar in Austria. We were in Innsbruck. It was somebody's 40th birthday. And there was a bunch of us in there. And the barman just said, "Oh, you guys working on the jump?" Just because we were British, snowboarder looking types. You know what I mean? I was like, fucking hell, this thing must have some reach. If just random people think we're working for
them. They had when it was the live events, there was about 250 people working on it, on the show. And most of them, I think 248 lived in Innsbruck, and me and Spence lived in Katai, because we were just we were working till, we were shaping and moving snow around during the...
So for those who haven't seen it or know of it, what was the premise of this TV program?
It went on for,
and how did you get involved?
we got involved through the production company inquiring through our snowboard club, wanting some help with just a bit of information about snow sports, really, and contacts. And obviously, we then soon sold our premising that we've been organising events and we could deliver certain aspects for them. And initially, we weren't part of the live bit. We were just involved with creating a couple of competitions on the mountain. Most of it was centred around, they did things like ice skating and other sort of stuff. And they did one live show from the mountain, and it got the best sort of ratings and feel about it. So they decided to move more and more onto the mountain. And by the time we were done in year 4, they'd given us our own part of the mountain. So we just had our own, closed it all off. In fact, on powder days, we were hiking or using our quad bikes to ride around because it's so big in the area, just drop each other off and get some freshies out. But no, we just come up with, I don't know, consultancy like, oh, we'd like to introduce snowboarding into the show. What do you think? I'm like, well, how much training can you give the guys? Because we understand, there's only a certain amount of time that we can script. So I'll probably get about 5 or 6 sessions in. I said, well, they're going to get to the point where they might be able to go down a slalom course. Cross, if they're really good, we could do some with like bumps and little bits of stuff. And they're like, oh, what? Not like Jenny Jones doing some like big kickers and stuff. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen.
Jesus
So
Christ.
it was always about meeting expectations. And the underlying kind of thing was always, we wanted to make you look like they're going to die, but don't obviously kill them. Kind of like they wanted to create that fear, that energy that was around. And in the early years, they would hype it, any little thing, they blow it up into much bigger than probably what it was. By the time year 4 came around, they had so much bad publicity. Well, for the channel, the bad publicity is still good publicity. So they didn't shy away from it too much. They just didn't glorify it quite as much. And everything was...
I mean, I guess the premise is that you might watch somebody hurt themselves. I mean,
that's pretty much what I think most people were...
like Evel Knievel type thing.
I think a lot of people probably did. They want that. I mean, it did get... The one serious one was Beth Tweddle. That was a really difficult one. She did suffer a serious injury with that. And I think it's always a case with what we realize is that athletes that are ex-Olympic athletes, they come and they just understand how to be coached. They listen and they absorb it and they can apply it. When you've got someone who's just famous for being on Towie or, one of the kind of social media sort of stars, don't really care. They're not there to win it. Whereas if you're an Olympian, you're a competitor. It doesn't matter. It's ingrained in you.
Yeah.
So they very quickly got good, but they didn't have that learnings that we all take for granted gradually over time. When you fast track through something. So they'd always do the run out of the big ski jump, just on skis, just without doing the jump, just to get used to the snow, the conditions, the speed, and all of that. And unfortunately, Beth just ran up towards the end but she sort of put the brakes on, but not very hard, if you will, like in snowplow. Hit the end and catapulted sort of forward, so she went on top of the padding. So then we had to take new steps to show the other guys that it's not that dangerous. It's not dangerous. This is a bit more of a freak accident that's happened. Because no one's touched that end. In all the years and times we've been doing it. So we had to put a big airbag across the bottom. Like the ones in Nitro Circus where they run motorbikes and BMXs into. I'm like, okay, we need someone to test it. And I was like, okay, is that my job? Right, okay, here we go. So I set off at full speed on skis, flying down the run of the ski jump. And I just took the whole way, and I had to show them the extreme way that you could hit it so that they, I wasn't going to go slow.
Yeah.
And literally just before the bag, 2 meters before, I opened up into a starfish. And, in your split second, you're like, is it safe? And thankfully it was, obviously. But and then no one touched it. No one went close to it. No one near it in the rest of the
Yeah.
jumps.
Who was your favourite? Who was there anyone that you got on particularly well with? Any celebrities that were cool?
Do you know what? Robbie Fowler was a really good. He was great. Had such a lovely way about him. He bowed out. Well, he missed the final and he fell on his final ski jump, and then his son was upset for him. He's like, no, look, this is the way things happen. You know, to be, it's just sort of competing. And he came back up and he said, can I come and join tomorrow's training session? Because I don't want to leave it having not landed a jump. So he just came, he could have easily just flown home, but he just wanted to come and just land one and then head home. Steve Redgrave was, never meet your heroes. A little bit that way.
He's a hero of yours.
Well, I just, someone who can do 5 Olympics and get golds is pretty bloody impressive. And that is still impressive.
Yeah.
He was just, in year one, approached it very much like a competition. And I think he's a president of Basie or something like that. He's linked in with, he's linked in with snowsports. Anyway, he started picking out FIS rules and rule book and just totally missed the idea of that it's a TV show. There's a competition element, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
Yeah, it's entertainment, and it got a bit serious on some things. With I'm not going down this course, and I'm not doing this, or this is dangerous, and we're like, don't go off this jump. We need to tweak this. He'd go off it, and then he busts himself. And like, but no, they working on the jump was amazing. It was so much fun, so creative. We got to build loads of stuff. I learned to ski actually on that, really. So I tested most of the courses. I skied twice before I started snowboarding, and I thought I'm going to test the courses so that I can effectively be like one of the celebrities in their ability. So that the coaches and instructors would go down and they do the course. Oh yeah, that's fine. And I'd go down. I'd be like flailing and catching all sorts of edges and what.
So when you stay at Chris Moran's place now, do you and him take the skis out?
Yeah,
for a bit?
I've pretty much. I think most holidays I've done 50-50. Although this is the first. This is the first one. We just snowboarded too, because Tilly also, my daughter, she skis and snowboards as well. I think it's important that they learn both. And I did go through a period with snowboarding where I got bored of it. It's just kind of like I was just cruising peace, and the sort of times I'd go away, I wasn't getting powder, so I was getting a bit frustrated with not. That's obviously what we all strive for. Certainly, the older you get, you are.
Totally.
And actually, through skiing, I did have a bit more of a love for. I felt like I could improve every time. I was like, I can get a better turn here. I can get lower. And it kept my interest. So I then, for a good 4 or 5 years, I'd say thereabouts. If it wasn't a powder day, I'd go skiing because I'd always be able to learn something and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the mountains are like that. Just do whatever makes you feel, whatever's fun, And then now I'm enjoying snowboarding with my daughter, like with Tilly. It's quite good fun. She's like, follow me, come off this, or kind of there's a good little vibe around it.
Does she share the sense that you've had on a snowboard?
Well, so this year is the first year, so she's got a holiday booked with her mum next week, and she goes skiing. She goes with her mum usually.
Right.
And she said, Dad, can you drop my snowboard off? I said, oh, you're not going to go skiing? She says, no, I think I'm done with skiing. I think I'm a snowboarder. And I'm just like, yes.
Kind of big tick in the parenting
It was a
book.
kind of like, without telling them a pressure. And I will still put her back on skis. We will still go skiing. But that was quite a nice moment. I was like, okay, yeah, you got it. Because we had a little bit of powder days and she got a little taste of it. We hiked a little bit and that was fun.
Yeah, so I mean, all I know I remember the BSA used to run the British champs, and it was Eddie Spearing. And from his story, basically, he got put in as the president of the BSA because no one else wanted to do it. And he wasn't there, and they all nominated him. And he just became that. He just then had that job.
I think anything.
But then I don't really know how that wound up, or then at what point you got involved with it.
So, yeah, BSA ran the champs and various other competitions. And then the Bordex guys, Mark and Adam, then took on the Brits for 3 years. I think they did 2 in what was it, Saasvee? It was Saasvee, Lax, and Meyerhofen. So they ran 3 of those. And then it became a little bit in the last year very corporate-ish, and they didn't really seem to put back into the snowboarder or listen to the snowboarders. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a in the half pipe, which was shocking. There was a bit of a revolt, and no one wanted to compete in it. I seem to remember Melanie and Leslie kind of fronting that because they've been doing World Cup circuits and said, this is our national championships. You're not showcasing how good, we can ride. So there was a bit of disdain towards those guys at the time. BSA decided to take it back on themselves for 2001, maybe. And it didn't go as well. They just couldn't raise the funding the same. It became a much lesser event. And then around that time, also, I was doing the athletes, and Spencer and Ed were doing the bomb comp. And we thought, well, let's put forward this proposal. So that's where the AIM series came in. We put forward a proposal. Now, at the same sort of time, and I remember specifically at the Invasion premiere, which I think is around 2001, Eddie came up to me and said, would you be interested in being the athlete representative for the BSA so we can get a better communication and closer connection to the riders?
Okay.
And I remember him saying, don't abuse the power. I was thinking, what sort of power could it be? What is this? What is this? What do I not know? You just, like you just said, he's just taking a job he didn't want. So what's the, and then I think, so then I became and then I don't really know what it involved, what I was doing. I mean, we met up every sort of 3 or 4 months and talk stuff, and they had various BSA treasures. It was Ian Felton, Eddie, John O'Grady, and Colin Holden then got brought in as well as treasurer. He worked with Colin. He worked with John O'Grady. I mean, the amount of work that those guys put in, and it's a thankless task. I mean, there is so much behind the scenes that those guys have done through that time, and they're totally unsung heroes in a lot of that. And I was subject to a lot of it a bit early on, and I think because I was the sort of younger one, I just got a bit more engrossed in it, and I think I just felt like anything with snowboarding. I just had more of a passion for. I guess I had more enthusiasm when I was younger. I hadn't been grated down by things in the past the same.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time when the sort of leading up to, I think maybe Salt Lake City was 2002. So was that Kilner? Was that Wakeham? It started to become, if we wanted funding for athletes, we had to be, that funding came into the national governing body. Well, the BSA wasn't. It was the British Ski and Snowboard Federation. We were one of the 8 or 9 organizations that kind of made it up. BSA was one of them, but we didn't have that voice. And we decided collectively to make the decision to merge into the main governing body so that we had that voice, or that chair, if you will, within that. It wasn't that, I don't think it became like fully official director-wise, but we definitely had a stronger voice in that element. And eventually when there was a point where there's a pot of money came in from UK sport, they wanted to simplify a lot of sports and said, here's some development funding. How can you simplify your organisations to deliver a stronger programme? Well, we've got Snowsport England, Snowsport Scotland, Wales, and Then we've got things like Ski Club of Great Britain, we're part of that. We've got, there's a Kandahar, I think, Ski Club, there's like 8 or 9. So I sat on a special committee to basically talk about how we could all give up, each one of those 9 has got a financial controller, a chairman, a this, that, and that. I probably did about 18 months on this. And eventually, all the ski lot just wanted a piece of their own action. They weren't interested in the bigger picture. No one was prepared to give anything up. They weren't didn't see that, because they could all access regional funding. Like, well, surely when you're part of this big one, we can still access regional funding with subgroups, and we can. But no, everyone was protective of their jobs and the kind of, what was going on.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
And even then, when it came down to 2012, I think it was, when the old BSF went bankrupt they overspent. They spent something like 40,000 or 50,000 pounds, I think, on TV rights to do the Alpine Champs. And the previous CEO had lied, and it all came out, and it went tits up. And then Sir Colin Moynihan, who had been the Minister for Sport, he's got a couple of really good ski racing kids. So he stepped in, and that's when the office became part of the British Olympic Association. So we had space in there, and that was a really good move. And it started from scratch. So we had a snowboard representative, which was me. I was the director on there. And then there was again about another sort of 7 directors, all from each of the other sort of, Snowsport England, Snowsport Scotland. And that was definitely much better. But the conversations back then, Zoe Gillians was the only one really getting any kind of funding. And the rest of the organisation was funded through Sir John Ripplack, that sponsored the Alpine Championships. So there was a lot of money coming in to support that. So snowboard was always seen on the wayside of it, and some politics got involved. And in the end, I got told there was a dispute around how we spent Zoe Gillians' funding that she got. And so many various people, coaches, advised that this would be the best route and not to go the route that she wanted to. I don't want to go too many details, it's not fair. But basically, it came down to a bit of neither of us were budging. So they set Conrad Bartelski as being the independent adjudicator, if you will.
Conrad Bartelski, what a fucking name that guy's got, right?
He heard her story and basically just turned around to me and then said, "What's your problem? Just let her do what she wants." And I was just like, what am I doing? I'm the snowboard director, and it's come down to ski racing side telling me what I should do on our own program. And actually the chairman of the organization was like really apologetic. It's like, we set something in motion that probably shouldn't have done, but we're now in that situation. And also I just had my daughter, and I decided at the end, I'm like, I've got enough stuff that I'm good that I'm doing within snowboarding to not be involved with the political side of what was going on. And I asked Leslie, I said, "Come on, Leslie, you're good at this. You're good at this shit. Get involved." And she was like, "I don't want to be the actual director, but I'll get involved with the program." And she was great. And obviously then she went on to do a lot. And Colin Holden stepped in as well, and it definitely moved. That's when we got the funding for, like, Jenny. Obviously the medal made a massive difference. And next thing you know, that whole Hamish program, and it's now, amazing what has come since I left, basically.
Well, someone's got to do the foundation works. You don't see it, and it's all in the ground. You know what I mean?
But yeah, it was just.
Well, I'm interviewing Jenny at the same time. Like, I've got to finish her interview later on this week. And your story, her story is quite well connected with yours as well, isn't it? Like, you sort of recognise some talent there. And
yeah, well, because I was sponsored by Salomon. I had to go and do the snow and rock shoot. So Salomon obviously wanted to get some good pictures representing the catalogue. So I'd turn up and wear what they wanted, their own. I didn't wear anybody else's stuff or boards. And they said, "Yeah, we found this girl just in resort," because it was always done in Val d'Isère or team. and this girl Jenny, and I remember going down the piste and she just flew past me Mach 10. And I was like, fuck, who's this? Who's this? And I remember I was like, she was a chalet girl. She was just doing her first season. And I was on the lift with her. And I was just, and also by having spent the day together and seen her ride, I was like, you're really good. And I was just moving into a more team manager sort of role, athlete management side of it.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, look, if you can get yourself over to the British Championships in lax, I can sort you out with accommodation, lift pass, and a whole new setup. You just have to get yourself there. I mean, I can't remember the difference in age. I think she would have been 8. Well, she was 17 or 18 at the time because she was.
Yeah, she was quite young, wasn't she?
He won the junior big air doing a backflip, basically.
Yeah.
And then she won the overall as well by nature of that. And say I would have been like 19 now. I've been 20. I've been 25. I mean, she just took my word for it and just got herself to lax. I mean, I'd be interested to see what she actually thought about the whole process. Like, is this guy legit? Who is this guy? And
well,
she had
apparently through somebody I know, she got a lift to lax. She was like, "Oh yeah, a mate of yours gave me a lift to lax." I was like, "Did they? I don't remember." No idea about that.
She had no clue who anybody or anyone was in snowboarding. She had no idea of. I don't think she'd really looked at magazines and knew who the pro riders or whatever were. And then after that, I just kind of, because she was on the Salomon team, we always had a pretty close connection. And I'd always try and look out for her. And she was obviously a rising star. And I was trying to, anything that came along that was relevant, and I'd try and push it her way. And it sort of grew over that time. And she had some, she had obviously some amazing highs in her career. She, earned every one of them. And she's got some great stories to tell. I mean, when she won the bronze, I then had about 6 to 8 weeks of absolute. It was just pandemonium. It was like the phone was just constantly going. I mean, for her, it was relentless. It really was. And I'd have Bristol Brownies sending me messages saying, "Do you think Jenny could come do an inspirational speech for us?" I was like, "Sorry, she's on Jonathan Ross that night." And then I'm like, my friend Ben worked for Stella McCartney. I was like, "Oh, she needs a dress. Can you hook her up?" So I'm kind of sorting these random things going out. I say, "Yeah, just send her into the store and we'll sort her out, and she can just borrow it for a couple of days."
No way, that's so cool.
It was a crazy time for her. I mean, I tell you what, anyone, and it must be the same for anyone in that sport that goes through it. It is an absolute media frenzy. I mean, we went to Manchester. We actually went together on that one. We spent 2 days there and just went through literally from radio station to breakfast TV to Blue Peter to, it's all at Salford. It's just a one-stop shop and getting off the train and being packed. It was just like, what?
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? I
she hit the front cover of all the newspapers, didn't she? I mean, it was just like, I've got a shot somewhere where you look at the newsstands and just her pictures everywhere. It was amazing.
I mean, I thought snowboarding was never going to win Sports Personality of the Year. Do you know what I mean? But I felt that year she was maybe robbed of that because it was such a big achievement, like the first British snow medal.
Yeah.
And the combined effort it takes to get there. There's no structure. All these structures have been made. And she's a direct result of all these things that have kind of come about.
Yeah.
But how did it feel for you when she won that bronze? Was that a big deal?
I was really stoked. I mean, I think the whole country was stoked for anyway. And she was coming towards the end of her career and she knew full well she was. Unfortunately, the course suited her, it was big and ballsy. And I don't think there's actually been a course as big. I think they sort of toned it down a little bit in future years. It might have picked back up again, but at the time it really suited her. And I was just, I was stoked because it was the icing on the cake for what had been a really good, brilliant career for her. Oh, she's still going, obviously, but I mean, from a competitive perspective,
from a competitive point of view.
I really felt like no one's given medals. They're not just given out. They are earned in anything, Olympics or X Games or whatever. And I just felt like that was so many people were happy. I think, especially ones that had known for a long time, knew as well how much that would mean to her as well.
Yeah.
So,
and also
it made a massive difference to what competitive snowboarding is now in the UK. Like, don't forget you don't get funding based on if you might win a medal, you might do something. There's a little bit of funding that goes towards that, but if you've already proven that you can get a medal, then the funding is quite considerable, and it becomes part of the program, and you can start to share some costs down. So, if she's got a wax tech and she's got a physio and she's got a coach, you can add other riders into that same program without it diluting too much of what she's got going.
Yeah.
And therefore you can share those sort of costs. And that's where, things really kicked off for the team.
So I'm just waving to Chris Moran. He's picking up his post.
Of course he is.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
And just the other thing about Jenny is that I asked her if, obviously, the comparison with the film Chalet Girl, but you were sort of involved in that film, weren't you? She's never seen it.
Does she not?
She's never watched it. And I was like, oh man, we should put on a fucking showing somewhere. That'd be...
Wow. So when I got given the script for that, and I dumbed it down because it was in places just totally dude central, kind of like it went off. And they had Tara Akidas as the main sort of lead hero role or whatever. And actually, when we were filming it, it was just around the time that Jenny was winning like X Games and just becoming that. She hadn't quite got that name.
Yeah.
I think if they just started filming maybe a year later, she might have had a better chance of securing that. But I really did try. I said, look, she is actually the Chalet Girl. She has come from this
exactly.
The story, like from in that way. And it was but yeah, I mean, Chalet Girl we brought as many friends and stuff into it as we could. Christian got involved, and we brought Roxy in as a brand to help them provide the girls for it, and brought all the different riders, the stunt guys. I mean, they filmed. So the scene at the end of the competition was filmed in St Anton,
right,
where they come into the arena. Christian's there on the mic. Spencer's one of the judges. Michelle from Roxy, she's one of the judges in there. That was filmed 2 months before the actual competition side of it, which was all filmed in Countertile.
Oh, no way.
So I was part of building all the courses with the guys from Schneestone that built the jump actually afterwards, and all the Olympic courses. Those guys they're the nuts. They really do know their shit. And we had Eni Rukavara. She was like their new hero sort of girl, and she was the stunt double for most of the stuff that Felicity Jones, the aspiring actress that went on to do Star Wars and a whole lot of other stuff with she was like her first break, and that was interesting, kind of like TV world, not TV world, that was film world, and that's another level of it's. I remember counting, there was like 60 people on set for just 2 people sitting down in the snow talking to each other.
Right.
It was ludicrous. I mean, we were working logistics of how stuff would go and how they'd move people around the mountain so that they could, get the tea boy up there so he could then, dunk the tea bag while somebody else puts the milk in, kind of system. Honestly, they don't do anything. That's
why films cost so much money, right?
Oh my god! Have you seen the sketch with Liam Gallagher when he's making himself a cup of tea?
Yeah.
So he's how he's like, and you expect me to be a rock star? I'm here making my own tea. I used to have 3 monkeys doing this. Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. When you saw the script, whoever wrote the script for that, were they aware of Jenny's story at all? Like, is there any correlation there at all? That's what I'm trying to find out, basically.
No, there wasn't. It was very much. the guy had just created this story, and he decided that Tara Dequitas was going to be the hero.
Yeah.
You know, the top female rider that they were going to promote. I mean, I could probably say this now. She was a nightmare when it came to filming. She was well at the end of her career for riding at the time, and they wanted her to do various tricks in the slope styles for her run, and she wasn't up for doing, like, I think it was like a front seven or something like that.
Right.
And in the story, she's got back problems, and that's where she ends up handing it over to the kid.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't do some stuff, and I think there was a bit of, I think she tried to blackmail them, or something sort of happened within the production, and it got a bit messy, and things weren't left very particularly well. I mean, the Honey Monster, what's it called? James Phillips. He's the main stunt. I think we had like 5 different stunt people for the lead character. And we had one guy who was actually a stunt man. He was one of the crazy Finnish guys, and he had to do a double backflip, but he wasn't allowed to land it. He had to do a 1.5 backflip. That was what was in the script. I was like, oh my God, this is... So what
surely no one can go off a jump thinking I'm only going to do 1.5 backflips.
Well, he did, and he was well up for it. He was like, bring it on. And I remember what we did was they filmed the intro, the run up and everything else, and the run on the big kicker. But then we built a scaled down version that was like 75% of the size of it. Yeah. And the landing was just cut up so much so that it was like a fluffy powder landing almost, but it didn't look like, because it was such a quick, the way they edited it. And he landed, I remember the film crew saying, when you land, if you could then almost face the camera so we can see your face once you've done this 1.5 backflip, that'd be a perfect shot. Man, he nailed it. He just literally went 1.5 backflip, landed Superman, and then almost just like end up in a position where the camera was perfect. Man,
oh my God,
you've earned your money today.
That's probably the hardest trick in snowboarding, is it? To actually know that you're going to give it to yourself.
God, yeah.
So there you go. Stu Brass, man about snowboarding, and no doubt about that. I think we all owe Stu a pint at some point for putting on events like the Brits and keeping the community going. The AIM School Tour for the thing for me, and I mentioned it at the top, I think it's still so important. And props for Stu and Spencer and anyone else involved in that for getting that going. And I think if anyone listening in the political powers that be to do with snow sports in the UK should be looking at that again, in my opinion. So thanks, Stu, for taking the time out of your surf camp holiday as well. Appreciate it, man. And it was good to see you over here. Thanks for calling me Chris, not Dave. So what else is going on? I'm still kind of getting over the hangover that is lax. Just what an amazing time. Put some highlights up on the Instagram, which you can find at Thank You Snowboarding Podcast over there. It's just a brilliant place. I know I keep saying it, but what a place to go snowboarding. It should be on your bucket list of places to visit. I'm not just saying that. I really blown away by how good it is. And just the views, like the topography. I think I've said this before. Like the views you get there are quite unlike anywhere else I've been in the Alps. Just incredible, like proper, high def 4K kind of snowboarding, if you know what I mean. Like you go over a hill and see an incredible view and it blows your mind. You feel like you're in a video game sometimes. So I'd highly recommend it. What else is going on? Kind of the new kit for next season starting to be showcased around the thing. There was a big event on straight after Lax called Shop's First Try, which I think used to be called ISPO, but it's now it's now like an event on snow. And there's new kit dropping, interesting new step-in systems by various people. I think Union Bindings have just dropped a step-on version, obviously licensing that off Burton. So it's like interesting things going on at the moment. And we'll keep you up to date if we get to see anything. Obviously, on that note, if you do need kit, go and see our friends at the Snowboard Asylum. They support this podcast, and it would be great if you can support them. They are snowboarders for snowboarders. They've been doing it 35 years, and they know what they're talking about. If you need kit, I won't bang on about my foot pain problems in the past that have been totally solved. There's a run in Lax that goes from the top of the glacier right down to a place called Flims, and it's over 2,000 metre vertical drop. And I mean, the distance-wise, it's got to be, I don't know, 5 miles. It is such a long run, and you can absolutely baz down it. And it's incredible. And doing that top to bottom with no foot pain. I mean, there's obviously a bit of leg burn towards the bottom, but if you've done that run, you'll know what I'm talking about. I think it must be one of the longest joined-up runs in Europe. And it's remarkable. And to be able to do that without wanting to tear my boots off at the bottom of it is an absolute pleasure. I feel like my legs have got more strength in them because they're not dealing with foot pain. So the lesson is go to your local snowboard shop, get fitted out with the right kit by people who know what they're talking about. And your holidays or your seasons or just your snowboarding experience will be all the better for it. I just can't stress that enough. I've been a fool for too many years, and I'm now really enjoying long runs on a snowboard because of it. So yeah, don't do as I do, do as I say on this occasion. Yeah, so on that, give a shout out to Burton for the support with some kit. Shout out to Transform Gloves, Tom Kingsnorth, what a G. Great to see him last week. Got a chairlift chat coming out with him at some point soon, a bit of bonus content. Talking about a time he went out drinking at Jake Burton's house at the US Open. Can't wait for you to hear that. Oakley Goggles, of course. Who else is looking after me? Volcom's looking promising. I'll be very happy to tell you. Still waiting for the parcel, but shout out to Volcom as well. Yeah, the Instagram's firing. If you want to get in touch with me, we're still kind of dealing with merch, trying to sort that out. If you are interested in a Thank You Snowboarding t-shirt or hoodie, if you can just ping me a message on either thankyouSnowboarding@gmail.com or on the Instagram just to let me know if you're interested. So I've got a rough idea of what to get made for whom. That would be cool. I will try and sort that out fairly soon. I'm extremely busy in my studio at the moment helping people make music, but I will get round to that and get something sorted. Shout out to Ian Taylor at Woven. He is going to help us with that. Again, a snowboarder helping snowboarders. What a joyous community we live in. I also want to shout out to Birgit Gruber, who used to work for Burton. Now, my nephew Fraser had leukemia many years ago, and he kind of looked up to me and my brother sort of doing seasons and going snowboarding. He wanted to go snowboarding, and Jeremy Sladen at the TSA and Birgit Gruber helped us out with some kit for him. And I'd never met Birgit. I think I'd spoken to her on the email. She was really kind enough to send him a board, a little kiddies chopper or whatever they were called at the time. And I never actually met her. And we were walking down from a fondue restaurant in Lax down a snowy piste last week, one evening. And I got chatting to somebody and we were chatting, and then I introduced myself and she said her name was Birgit. And there aren't many Birgits, certainly in the snowboarding world. So I said to her, I don't suppose you're Birgit Gruber, and it turned out she was. And I said, I don't suppose you remember, but you sent a board to my nephew who was really ill at the time. And actually, she didn't remember doing that, but maybe that was a bit more of a day-to-day thing for her. But it meant a lot to me at the time and still means a lot. So, yeah, if you're listening, Birgit, I want to give you a big shout out. You are a kind human being who helped a little boy out. And I'm just trying to dig out an old photo of me and him on his board. And I've been looking at old photo albums today, trying to find it, horrified by the younger version of myself. But yeah, I haven't found it yet. But when I do, I'll stick it up on the Instagram and I'll send you a copy, Birgit. But yeah, I just wanted to say nice one. It's a community of snowboarders that is really important, and the snowboarding community is a beautiful thing and should be looked after at all cost. Certainly feeling that after last week in Lax. What a great bunch of human beings and what a great positive place it was. So yeah, I'm stoked. And looking forward to getting out in the mountains again to do another couple of episodes in a few weeks' time. More news on that as it comes, but there'll be some more chairlift chats as well. So look out for them as and when. If you haven't seen any of the Lax Open, you can find it, I think, on Red Bull TV now. It hasn't got the Ed and Tim commentary, which I'm sure is probably the best commentary. But they've got the guys from the Bomb Hole doing the commentary, which is still pretty good, but obviously not as great as Tim and Ed, basically. That's how it is. But yeah, watching Mia Brooks win, stood alongside Vicky and Nige, who I interviewed last season. Watching their daughter win gold at Lax, where she lives some of the time, was an incredible moment. I'm so stoked, not only for the day of snowboarding that I got to do with them, but just to see them and be so proud of their daughter. What a moment. I think everyone was tearing up who was nearby. And what a wonderful thing. So if you haven't seen Mia's winning run from the Lax Open, I mean, I personally thought she had loads left in the tank, but it seemed like the field just couldn't handle the pressure straight away. So, and they kind of threw it. So Mia was head and shoulders above the rest, and I still think she had loads in her legs to give, but she didn't need to. She just won outright from the first run. So fair play. That is some champion level shit, that is. The music for this episode is obviously none other than Oasis and their track Slide Away, and it's from, I think it's like the Axel Poporte section from Odd Man Out, which is a seminal movie, not mostly for the fact that it features UK riders and may have been like the first biggest thing that UK riders have been in. But Odd Man Out is a seminal snowboard movie. It is on YouTube, sadly, because they had loads of great music on it. None of it's cleared for use, so it's basically visuals only. There is a Spotify playlist, but it doesn't sync up with all the cuts and everything. So sadly, at the moment, unless maybe Christian Stevenson fancies having a crack at getting the music all cleared for it, that is what you got to deal with. But bang on, Slide Away at the start of the Axel Poporte section, and I think it works pretty well. And anyway, that's what Stu chose. He was in that movie, so fair enough. And the Spotify playlist is being put together. It's up on Spotify, obviously, as Thank You Snowboarding. Go and check that out if you need some music. So this is quite a lengthy episode, so I won't ramble anymore. We'll be back next week, hopefully with none other than Jenny Jones. We're going to finish that off this week. So, all being well, Jenny Jones will be on the show next week, and I think you're going to enjoy this one too. We're halfway through, and it's sounding pretty good so far. So, I hope you're well. I hope you get some turns wherever you are. I hope you're planning your trip to the Alps, or if not, get on it. The Alps are firing. They need you to go and visit. Snowboarding still needs you, and you need snowboarding. So get to it. And until next week, thank you, snowboarding. Peace.